Well, welcome to another episode of Tie-Dye Dialogues. I'm Lou Silverman, your host, and today I'm very fortunate to have Shereen Lerner with me, who's, as you can see, well-dressed today for the interview. Um, in this interview series, I am trying to kind of peel the layers of the onion and get to know some of our local leaders and their styles. Their leadership styles during a pandemic, and just get to know them a little bit better. Now, I know Shereen and I are fortunate to have known each other through Tempe Leadership. And I already know that Shereen's a wonderful leader, but I want the world to know that. So how are you today, Shereen? Thanks for joining me.
I'm great. It's nice to be here. Thanks, Lou. I appreciate
Welcome.
being asked.
So Shereen, I want to let the millions of people who are going to be following this video know a little bit about you. So um, anybody can Google and find out that you're a professor at Mesa Community College. And you've been there since 1992, I understand, correct?
Correct.
So what's the area of your curriculum?
So I teach anthropology and archaeology. I got my PhD from ASU, thus the ASU colors.
Mhm.
Um,
What are Mesa Community College colors?
Red and blue.
All right, well, that's
So I do
that's
wear that.
McClintock High School also, and that's the University of Arizona. We got some problems here. So, um,
Yeah.
so I know very little bit about what anthropology is. Would you mind telling me a little bit about that?
Well, anthropology is the study of humanity, the study of cultures and ways of life that people live, because culture is all around us. And we all come from our own worldview based on our cultural background. And that's what anthropology does is we study people's ways of life, we study their cultural backgrounds, we study values, we study their ideas, all of that comes from uh, our background and where we began and who we are. So really, we're the study of humanity all over the
Wow,
world.
that sounds like a wide open subject. Is almost any class curriculum that you come up with falls under that banner in some way or another.
There's such flexibility on what you can teach. So, for example, this semester I'm teaching about archaeology in the old, what we call the old world, the other hemispheres, other side um, of the world. I'm teaching a class on death and dying. I'm teaching a class on world religions. I'm teaching a class on gender, women in other cultures. I'm teaching one on ethnic relations in the United States, and I'm teaching one just broadly about cultural anthropology or world cultures.
Whoa, you're teaching all of those in one semester?
Yeah. But it's basically what you said, right? You can cover so much in
But
anthropology.
how many courses a day are you teaching?
Well, normally when I'm teaching this, I would be teaching 2 or 3 classes a day and split it
Mhm,
up. So I have like 3 classes on one day and 3 classes on another. Of
mhm,
course, because of the pandemic, we're doing this online.
right,
Uh, so I teach some face to face and then the rest straight up online, face to face online, and then some.
right.
But typically it would be 3 a day.
Okay.
I would do.
So in a typical year or semester, you'd be in a classroom 3 times a day
Yes.
with X number of students in your classroom.
Right. I'd have 35 students in a classroom. I teach 3 classes on a Monday, Wednesday, and 3 classes on a Tuesday, Thursday, different classes with those.
Um, you mentioned, since as a lawyer, unfortunately, I deal with death and dying every day.
Mhm.
Tell me a little bit about that course. What are you teaching in that course?
So that one is talking about how different cultures look at death and dying, and that the fact that dying is actually a process. It's not something that happens immediately, but there's a whole process to preparing for death. It actually fits nicely with your work on in
Yeah,
trusts and all and
yeah,
wills. Uh, but basically, that there's different perspectives on what happens when you die, um, and there's different processes on how do you bury somebody. What do you do when somebody dies? What's the mortuary practices? Are
wow,
people buried? Are they cremated? There's all sorts of new cool things you can do with
right.
bodies as well now.
The one thing that what we've learned about and are now actually going to become active with the legislature, it's called composition. The Washington state law has been amended last year, that allows composition, which is the human remains are converted into soil
Mhm.
and then used for fertilizer.
Yeah.
And I think it's a really neat option myself. But
Oh,
it's
there's
the
so
only
many.
state though that does that right now.
There's a
So
lot of different great options out there. I actually have my students investigate all the different things that they
mhm.
can do. It's really fun. By the time you're done, you kind of are like, I want to do this alternative instead of that.
Well, are these options that we're talking about legal or are they just theoretical?
No, these are things that people are doing out there. There's a lot of different things. If you went on and there's a lot of great websites about different options that are there.
Now,
Uh,
in our country or worldwide as well?
Worldwide and on our country. A
Interesting.
lot of these are coming from our country as part of it. So, but part of what they learn in the class is that the cultures actually help shape how people view death and dying. It's just another big part of our culture.
I'd like to talk to you more about that. I don't think we need to spend too much more time on this interview, but that's interesting to me. The other, episode in my life that I've talked to you about ad nauseum is the 1966 Texas Western basketball team that won the national championship, beating Kentucky. And the game itself has no relevance to history, but the fact that Texas Western played only Black players and the University of Kentucky was all white, and that just was a very history-breaking game, history-making game. And I think that would fit in well with your curriculum. And I would recruit a player or two to come to and speak to your class. I think that'd be fabulous. So
Well, it would be great.
let
My
me know,
class,
but because they're getting older, you don't have your window is getting
there,
smaller and smaller. So
well, my ethnic relations in the United States, that class would work. We actually also have, I don't teach it, but an anthropology and sports class as well
okay.
that looks at that because how sports is viewed around the world is different.
Oh yeah, sure.
Well, and
So,
what sports are
yeah,
popular and the history as well. So those all fit into anthropology. We could
yeah.
definitely talk more about that.
I'm going to ask you in a few minutes during our interview today about your bucket list. And one of my bucket lists would be if I could meet one of the players on that team. And two or three have already passed away. So like I said, the window is closing a tad. But
Yeah,
um, I went to a website called Rate My Professors. And I don't know if do you ever read these things? But
sometimes
they're,
I do.
Shereen, they're not very good. I have to warn you. I'm going to read a couple of them. Honestly, the best professor I've had so far. Dr. Lerner's classes aren't very homework heavy, yay, but we're still learning a lot about the topics. Another one, I highly recommend this, not hard to accomplish. I came to this class looking for an easy A, but left with a new perspective on society. I would recommend this class and Professor Lerner for everyone. Here's one, please take her class. You will not regret it. Wow, and these reviews are amazing. You should read these.
Thank you.
One of the best profs I've ever had. She is so smart about whatever subject she is lecturing on. Well, you've got them drinking your Kool-Aid. It's all I can tell you. So
Thanks for that.
whatever your Kool-Aid is, I don't know what it is. So
I don't know.
so tell me a little bit about it. I always like to know more about people's families, and I know a little bit about yours, but I know you're pretty excited about the family you've got. I know, and you're proud of it. Tell us a little bit about your family.
Well, I've got two great kids and a great husband, and they're all they just are great people overall. One of the things that I love about that nuclear family that I've got is how invested people are in all my family is in trying to do good things, whether it's volunteering or whether it's working in a profession. Like my daughter works for reproductive health issues. My son will call himself a feminist. He strongly believes in women's rights. My husband was raised by all women. And so he is also a strong feminist. So I feel real good about that, having
Mm-hmm.
feminist family, being one myself.
Yeah.
So that's one part of my family, but they are, I love my family. They're just the greatest people. And I'm real fortunate to have that group. And then I have I'm still fortunate to have my father alive at 96. My father and stepmom are great people. As you know, we've talked about my father's history. My mother also had a history of coming from Europe and escaping the Holocaust for both of them. So there's that. I'm fortunate to have that family as well. And my step brothers and sisters and my brothers. I have two brothers as well who are great people. So I don't have a big family. It's a pretty small group, but I'm fortunate that we all get along. And I have the utmost respect for my brothers, their families, my step siblings, their families, and my folks.
You have a lot bigger family than that, because just about everybody that I know loves you as if you were part of their family. So
Thanks. Thank you.
That's the nature of your beast. Can I ask a few questions about your mom and dad? Was your dad actually in a camp?
No, neither of my parents were in a camp because they both escaped before.
Okay.
Their parents, both my parents, my grandparents, realized that the only way to survive was to escape. So on my mother's side, they were forced to escape because he had been taken into a camp. And then when they got him released, it was on the condition that they leave the country immediately. And in my father's case, they left also before they were into camps. But then getting to the U.S. was quite challenging for both.
Where did they come into the country? Do you know?
Both came in New York.
Okay.
My parents came in separately, of course. They both came they both grew up in Vienna, but both, my mother ended up going through England and out, and my father started in France and then ultimately ended up leaving through Portugal.
And they met here. Your parents met in the States.
They did.
Yeah, that was the same with my grandparents. They got out and they ended up in Chicago.
Oh.
But then from Chicago, the routing gets very interesting, because then they ended up owning a small shop in Douglas, Arizona, like a little furniture shop. And then that's where my dad was born. Then they moved to Nogales, and in Nogales, they had another business of some sort. Then they moved to El Paso. So they never left the border. Once they came to the border, they never left the border.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, and that's right. And so my dad, from almost from his infancy, was fluent in Spanish. And I think he might have learned Spanish before he learned English, which was pretty helpful for him living on the border, because he was also an attorney. And you really, if you don't live in El Paso, I think you have to speak Spanish. I think it's a huge liability if you don't. When I go to look at your history that's pretty prominently posted on the internet, you have been or currently are a member of a lot of commissions and councils and boards. Tell me a little bit about your philosophy about that kind of service and why you've gotten involved in so many.
It's a really good question over why, but it's I think it's started early, of just being interested in providing support where there was a need. So, I could go all the way back to just helping out at my kids' school. And even though I was working full time all the way through that, I've been working full time all the way. If there was something that needed to get done, I would jump in, and that maybe started my whole interest in volunteerism, and then expanding to the things that just I found where there was a need. When I worked in historic preservation, I talked to people who would get frustrated about the fact that people didn't realize the importance of cultural heritage and of the past and of preserving culture. So I found outlets to work in that, because I also agreed, when we all come from a history, right, of family and a history of culture, but very often people just put that aside. And so that really drove me to get involved in a lot of the historic preservation commission, different commissions and groups, and the archaeological groups that I got involved in. And then over time, as I was teaching different things, as I moved from teaching archaeology to culture and cultural anthropology, I started getting more interested in human services issues and into working on what we can do to help others and to learn about others. Because if you're going to teach, you need to listen, you need to hear from others, and you need to understand different perspectives. So one of the best ways for me to get those perspectives was to throw myself into working on boards, commissions, volunteer, and to hear and learn from people who I otherwise would not be exposed to. So I think it's been a progression. I think anytime for anybody who gets involved, it's a progression. You don't know what you're getting into when you start, and you don't know what's going to
Yeah.
connect with you.
Well, you don't know that you're going to like it, and you liked it, obviously. You liked the feeling that it gave you.
I love volunteering. I think that's
Yeah.
one of the greatest things that anybody can do is to give of their, if you can give, you can always give other things, but giving of your time shows a
Mhm.
commitment. And to me,
Yeah,
that's
one of the things that I tell people when I've spent time with them, like, you and I have just gone for a walk and socialized together, is is the greatest gift that you can give another person is your time, if you think about that, because that's all you really have to give is your time.
right.
And I like that. I like that thought. So,
It's also
um,
something that you can, I think it's something that you can emulate too for, I'm a parent. I want my kids to see giving back. And I've seen that. And my husband serves as well. I've seen that with them. They understand the idea of giving.
mhm,
And
yeah,
so that's something you can pass that on.
they've grown up in
Generation.
that environment. Um, I know that congratulations are in order for a recent post that I don't understand at all. You'll kind of help me with it, but you've been appointed to the Independent Redistricting Commission, correct?
Correct.
And I hear, and what I read was you're the first Democrat that's ever been selected on that commission. That if the internet is telling the truth.
Well, they appoint a new commission every 10 years. So I was,
Oh, okay,
and
got
there's a
it.
commission, there's a 5 people on it, 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats, and an
Okay,
independent. So I just happen to be the first Democrat. They've now appointed their second Democrat
okay.
that's on that. Yeah.
So tell me a little bit, what's the function and goal of that commission?
So every 10 years when the new census comes out, we actually shake up our whole districting and we get moved into different congressional districts or different state legislative districts, but it's based on census data. And so uh, this is our time, right? 2020, 21, we did a census, even
Yeah.
though the pandemic hurt it. So now it's time to kind of take a look again. And the reason I applied is because I teach in my ethnic relations class, I teach about things like voter suppression, gerrymandering, voter access, and voter rights. And again, if I'm going to talk about it, let me get involved in it. And so I applied to do this because I feel really strongly that we need to provide everybody an opportunity to be able to vote in the easiest way possible, to make it as accessible as possible, and to make sure their interests are
Mhm,
heard. And that's what this commission is going to do. It's going to be quite an interesting year.
mhm.
I hear it gets quite controversial because everybody wants their interests taken care of.
How active do you anticipate this commission will be for you?
Very active,
A lot of meetings,
a lot of meetings. I see this as taking over a lot of my time
a
next
lot
year.
of Zooming, I suspect then too, in the current environment, so.
Yeah, in the beginning, but we're supposed to do meetings and hearings around the state. So we'll see. Once the pandemic's over, we'll probably be traveling, but in the beginning, they'll all be Zooms.
Mhm.
Yeah, it'll
So,
be it can make a difference in voter and people's votes being heard.
good. Well, that's a good commission to be on then. If I were let's assume that I'm a viewer of this interview, and I'd like to know more about Tempe leadership and why I should be in it. I think you're a good representative of the organization to answer that question, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure. Well, one of the best things that happens in Tempe leadership is you meet people like you. I
Yeah.
wouldn't know you if it wasn't for Tempe leadership. And uh, one of the greatest things I got out of Tempe leadership was the network, the people that I met, the doors that opened to me to learn about the city, and actually the doors that opened to me to learn where I could put my energies. I would not have been on the Tempe Community Council, the Tempe Community Action Agency, places like that, if it weren't
Mhm.
for Tempe leadership, or serving on boards and commissions like the Parks and Recreation Board. Those are things I've done because of what I learned in Tempe leadership. So I learned a lot about the city, but more so, it's the people. And I think that's what we all gain out of Tempe leadership are the people that we meet, the friends that we make, the networks that we connect with. And especially if I was a business person, this is a great way to broaden my network and meet people who I wouldn't otherwise know. So
Well,
that's what I think about it.
well, number one, of course, you're speaking to the choir on that one, but you've done a really good job of, I think, how I would have articulated it too. Just coincidentally, I don't know if you knew this, but you were in class 30. I know that, and now everybody knows that, which um, historically has been the most cohesive class that I've ever seen. I was in class 28, so I was 2 years ahead of you, but I mean, and I was president of the board your year. So I kind of was overseeing a lot of what you guys were doing, including your massive bike corral project. And it was an incredibly impressive class. And it's 5 years or so now, give us perspective. It's still a very active class. You had some really amazing leaders in that class. So
We do. We have people, it's amazing how active people are from that class. And also just how engaged we are with each other, but also how engaged they
yeah.
are in the community. It's really great, actually.
Do you
Again,
think
that's an example.
Do you think that's a coincidence that you just happened to have that group thrown together? Or was there some spark that occurred that made that group so cohesive?
So my philosophy about Tempe leadership is people are drawn to it for a particular reason. Something in that moment in time says, I want this experience. And whatever that driver is might end up helping you be more cohesive with your group. We all came into Tempe leadership for different reasons, but there was something that drove us there. I don't know why we're connected, but I know other people say their class still gets together, or at least
Yeah.
parts of their class. So I think all classes create a bond in Tempe leadership. And it's with anything, right? You have some that have group pockets, right? 4 or 5 people over here get together, 4 or 5 people over there. And that's part of what Tempe leadership does as well.
Yeah,
It
I mean,
brings
there's a
people
certain
together.
chemistry that anybody has, that you may have a chemistry with this person, but not so much that person.
Yeah.
That's just the way it goes. So,
Yeah.
I'm going to try to finish up in the next 5 minutes. So, I know that you have other things to be doing. Do you mind telling me, kind of revealing what you feel your greatest failure has been, or if you could have a do-over, what would you do over?
That's interesting. Let's end on failure.
No, I'm not going to end there.
I'm
I'll come back.
I'm kidding.
Okay.
So I don't know. It was a do-over. So there were 2 things. I was thinking about this when you told me you might ask me this. One is when I was the state historic preservation officer for a number of years, and had my kids while I was that, and I found myself working a million hours, traveling a lot, and kind of missing out a lot of stuff. And then my daughter raised that question in 1st grade over my absence. And I thought if that was pretty astute. So I left my job and I started working for a friend of mine who owns her own consulting firm, archaeology consulting firm. And I thought I would be fine doing that. And I was not very good at it.
Mm.
And then thankfully, the job at MCC opened up and I was able to move into that where I've been 29 years.
Yeah.
That worked out great. But that was a failure that I ended up landing on my feet. I was grateful to my friend for giving me the landing zone to
Yeah.
leave my other job. But then thankfully I was able to land someplace that I've ended up loving and doing a good job. The other one, just to tell you briefly, was when I was taking my comprehensive exams for my PhD, I scored the score that you need to pass. And my professor, who was my advisor, chair of my committee, called me in and he said, "You didn't pass." And I said, "But I did." And he said, "Not as far as I'm concerned." So he made me retake the test because he thought I could do better. And I remember sitting outside the building thinking my career was over. What was I going to do with my life? I had committed to archaeology. How was I going to bring myself back from this? And I picked myself up and I studied real hard and I redid it and I scored a lot better the second time. So I guess he was right.
Yeah.
But it was a really tough call to kind of think, should I even bother or what do I do? And ultimately I did it, but it was a tough one. That failure, but it came back. And then obviously gave me the rest of my life in archaeology, which was great.
I think that failure provides sometimes the greatest opportunities, and you just have to look at it in that perspective, but a lot of times it's only historically perspective, not current, because in the current perspective, you're devastated,
Right.
but it's how you recover and deal with it.
Like what happened with me ending up at MCC. I wasn't doing great.
Yeah, right.
Exactly.
If that hadn't happened, I probably wouldn't even be talking to you right now. There'd be no connection. So, what's on your bucket list? What is it that you still want to do?
Well, it's interesting. Travel is always, I think everybody's got that on their bucket list.
Right.
I'd like to travel and immerse myself a little bit more wherever we go, and wherever I go, and not just be a tourist, but
Yeah,
get
get into the culture of it.
And then the other one I was thinking about, because I had a meeting this morning that was talking about equity in our society. And to be quite honest, one of my bucket lists is to see some change, the change that we talk about all the time. I'd love to see us having a better overall life where we're not so angry, and where we see a greater amount of equity in our culture, people understanding each other, people accepting each other. How would I get involved in doing that? It's kind of dribs and drabs. I'll do the little bit I can do, one step at a time. That's part of why I teach, right? I try to make anybody who can make small ripples, small steps. That's all you can do.
Yeah.
So those are my two things: traveling and immersing myself in culture, and then seeing if I can do a little bit to help our society understand each other.
Well, I can tell you from reading the reviews that your strategy is working, because you've got so many students that have really loved you, and it just goes on and on. I mean, I'm scrolling and scrolling, and I'm still looking and looking. I'd like to take you on a road trip to El Paso when this pandemic's over. I really would. I'd like to introduce you to that Southwest, but from the standpoint of somebody who grew up there. So I could show you some of the sites, and this is where my dad worked, and this is my school, because I think you'd have an interesting experience culturally from that is because you won't be a tourist, you'll be a local. So
that's perfect.
Well, I want to thank you very much. I'm going to close on something that's sort of a weird closing, but I've been watching a lot of Zooms on TV, as you have. They'll interview everybody in the world on CNN or any network. And I'm very curious when I see the background. What books are they reading? How messy is it? Like, you can see from my background, I ended up putting up a tie-dyed sheet, because if I didn't have it there, the mess would be unbelievable. But here's my question to you. Did you intentionally, because I know you're probably Zooming a lot, did you intentionally choose your background, or is that kind of accidental, those photos or pictures that are behind you?
This is what's up in my house.
Okay.
Things I do is, if you were to walk in my house, I think you've been here, so if you were to come in now, you'd see stuff from all over the world. So this large one right here, I met the man who painted that, this Chinese man. I was at a little market and he was painting, and I just fell in love with what he was doing. So I bought that. It was folded up and opened it up there. The other one that you're seeing probably is from Angkor Wat, which is in Cambodia. My son got me that one.
Okay.
And the other one, I mean, again, there's some things from Thailand. I've got a lot of stuff from the Southwest.
What is that? What is the item that I see hanging from the ceiling behind you?
That is from Russia. When I was in Russia with a group of archaeologists, I met somebody who made that, and it's a little bird that's made out of wood, balsa wood.
Okay,
so
very good.
Everything comes from. I mean, I'm an anthropologist, right? Sure.
So it tells your story of anthropology.
Yeah.
Mine tells my story of my hobby. So
exactly.
Well, I thank you sincerely, Shereen, for being my guest today. I've respected you since I was on the selection committee of Tempe Leadership when you got selected. So
I'm grateful you selected me.
you've got that kind of personality. So thanks for sharing with us. And I look forward to more time with you when we're not so socially disconnected.
I feel the same.
All right.
Thanks.
Take care. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.